Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Clare, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Matthew Campion. Matthew has held leadership positions in both mainstream and special schools in England and Qatar. He is currently director of Renad Academy, a Qatar Foundation school for autistic children. He's also acting director of Warif Academy, a Ministry of Education school operated by Qatar Foundation. Warif Academy is the first school in Qatar for children with profound and multiple learning disabilities. And today we're discussing working with the community and supporting students to thrive in the wider community context. Enjoy the episode. Hi Matt, how are you?
Hi Claire, nice to meet you.
And you. We are fairly far apart in the terms of geography and location, but we've managed to get together to talk through, and our technology is just about working, so I hope that we succeed across the recording. I'm talking with Matt today about supporting students to thrive in the wider community. And I know I've already talked to Matt off air, and it's clear his passion, I guess, around this topic and the importance of it. But I wondered, Matt, if you could just start off with a quick intro to the listener about your experience.
Absolutely. So my name is Matt Campion. I'm the school director of Renad Academy, which is a Qatar Foundation school for children with autism, and also the acting director of Warif Academy, which is a Ministry of Education school, which is operated by Qatar Foundation for students with profound and multiple learning difficulties. So this is my 7th year now in Doha. Prior to that, I worked in special schools back in the UK with children with a range of additional needs, for autism, children with physical disabilities, with complex medical conditions, with learning difficulties. So special needs is and always has been a real passion of mine.
Brilliant, Matt. And I know we talked off air a bit about it being the Warif Academy being the first school in the area for profound and multiple learning disabilities. So that's some tall feat though, as well as being exciting.
It's there's a real focus in the country to ensure that every child has access to school and access to a place in education. So very much a focus of the foundation that I work for is making those things happen, looking at the barriers that are there for children in terms of their education, taking those barriers away and making sure that every child has access to education and also therapeutic support within their daily life.
That's such important work, and I'm sure it's going to be a massive challenge ahead of you, but really exciting times and amazing to be part of it and I guess leading it as well. I wondered if you could answer our reflective question, what you wish you knew then that you know now about the topic today.
Absolutely. So the topic really is focusing on taking students into the broader community, into that wider community. And if I take a step back in the last 20 years in my career, really focusing on the child and not making assumptions about what is right for a child, what is right for a family, but really having those conversations, having that dialogue around what the child wants. The pupil voice is really important, and what the families want. So I think just having that dialogue with the families and the children and making sure that what we provide in terms of our provision is what is wanted, not what we assume a child or a family might actually want or need.
Yeah, and is that where we talked a little bit about this off air, but is that where your kind of thoughts around broadening students' experience of school by accessing the wider community kind of came in from that? I mean, it's pretty much a person-centered, student-centered approach that you've mentioned there, and family-centered, which I think is important. But is it that work that kind of drove that community work forward?
Absolutely. I think it's something, if we are preparing all of our children for the world that they live in and the world that they will live in for the rest of their lives, it's making sure that we have that access into that broader community. I think if we think about a special school setting. Special schools are very, very safe places. Everyone's there because they are there because they want to work with our children with a range of additional needs. But a special school setting is not the real world. It's a space where we take our children into, where we can meet their needs fully to the best of our abilities. We can provide access to education, access to therapy, to all of those things. But that's not where the child lives. The child spends most of their life outside of school with their families in that broader community. So it's really vital that we take the child into where they live, but also equally that we prepare that community to receive those children in the very, very best way possible also as well.
Yeah, you see some lovely projects. I actually was working in Slovenia. This is a long time ago, in a kind of residential specialist service, doing a bit of team teach work actually. And they had a cafe in the capital, and students from the school were trained up to work there. And like you've just mentioned there, that really was about the community receiving the group and like being exposed to it, for want of better phrase around it. And it was wonderful to see the interactions, and I think that that's such an important element as educators to
Absolutely.
give that preparation to the community and to the individuals.
Absolutely, and that's a real focus for us as a school, as a foundation, that a lot of what we do, it's really kind of multifaceted. So we focus on the child, we focus on the family, but we focus on that broader community as well. So we have a team of colleagues who are trained in autism workshops, in autism training, accredited training, and they will work with many different places within our community, whether it be supermarkets, the cinema, restaurants, the airline, all the places where our children go with all of their families. We have colleagues who will deliver training to those settings to make sure that those people have that understanding of autism, and that they understand that our children may present it in a different way, but they have just as much right as every other child to access all of those spaces. And we've really seen a real difference in the time that I've been in the country in terms of people being receptive to that training, to taking on board the information about our children, and adapting their practice, adapting their thinking, adapting their approaches to make sure that our children are welcomed into their community. And that's had a real positive impact.
Oh, I love that. It makes me think of systems theory, where it's the idea that I'm more explaining it maybe for the listener as opposed to you, but that it feels like it's exactly from systems theory, where there's a system in school that the student is part of, then there's a system at home, and then actually there's a system in the community. And it sounds like by kind of meshing all of those and trying to adjust all of those systems, it's making a real difference.
Absolutely. It's really trying to make everywhere as consistent for our children as possible. So how they can function, whether it be in the school setting, in the home setting, in that broader community, that they can access places in the same way, whether that be how they communicate, how they respond, how they function within a broader environment. It's really important that for our children that things are as consistent and as clear in every element of their life as it possibly can be. But it takes a team, and it has to be that consistent approach with school, family, and that broader community, really.
If you work with parents and carers, our family engagement training equips you with the skills, knowledge, and understanding to build positive relationships. Help your families understand and support their child's behaviour, recognise the challenges and opportunities in your organisation, and receive an exclusive range of resources you can use to practically support your families. Take a look at this exciting training option on the Team Teach website. I'm also wondering, maybe it's the devil's advocate in me, but I'm wondering if there's been some barriers to that change. So I think it was 2018 you mentioned arriving and starting that journey yourself in Doha, but I wonder if there's been barriers along the way for students accessing the wider community and how you might have overcome some of those.
Absolutely. I think if we think about the country where we were maybe in 2018, a lack of understanding of autism and that kind of broader level of special educational needs was the main barrier, that people didn't necessarily understand how our children presented, how they communicated, a lack of understanding around autism. Many of our children have really challenging times, and that can manifest into challenging behaviours, whether that be a behaviour which is towards themselves or towards a different person. So often, especially in my first few years in my role, I'd speak with our families and they may have been to the ice rink, or they may have been to the supermarket or the cinema, and asked to actually leave a place because their child was having a really hard time. So lack of understanding, seeing how our children kind of presented and seeing that as a negative behaviour or a naughty child. The way we approach at school, that we see all behaviour as a form of communication. So we don't have naughty children in our school. We have children who are autistic, who have challenging behaviours because elements of their life can be challenging. So it's our responsibility as the adult to listen to that message in the school setting, but to support families in the broader community to listen to and understand that message in that wider community sense. And again, as I said, this is my 7th year here now. We're really seeing a change now because people are receptive to listening, and we're very fortunate being part of Qatar Foundation that we are led by the royal family. There's a big push in terms of autism awareness. Our QF chairperson is the person who introduced World Autism Awareness Day. So that's a worldwide event, and we celebrate every April. We celebrate autism. We celebrate autism every day of our lives, but in April in real focus, where we have a huge event around autism, a very prominent event. And last April, we had over 2,000 people came to this event, and over 30 different entities around special educational needs, all in that same place. So this is something now which has a much higher profile, and our children and our families are out there, and things are changing, and things are changing rapidly.
Yeah, it does sound so transformational. Now, all I want to ask is like massive success stories, because I bet you've got loads of like young people that you've worked with, and to see the difference about going into the wider community. Maybe I've had a bad day and need to hear these success stories today.
We have every one of our children brings their own story. So we have children who couldn't function in the community, who couldn't go into a supermarket, who couldn't go into a restaurant, who couldn't travel. So we have families who had to change their travel plans because their child couldn't cope with going through the airport, being on the plane. So we, as I say, we work very closely with our families, and many of our children. So we have children who couldn't do things, who struggled, who now can. So we have children who travel with their families, and there's a support system that's actually there now. We can work with our families around a social story to prepare their child for their journey. The airport in the country here has brought in a sensory room in the actual airport now. So which is amazing. So our families can go into the sensory room kind of prior to their flight. We've worked with Qatar Airways to provide sensory stories and sensory bags for during the actual flight themselves. So we have children who will be on the plane who have access to those special materials. There's a huge collaboration with all the different entities in the country who are focused on special educational needs to provide those pathways for all of our children. So many successes, but they always start with a small step. So it takes many steps. It takes many failures also as well. It's not always that linear movement towards achieving a goal. We really face our challenges. We have children who it takes much longer for. But again, one of the privileges of my position, having been here 6 years, is that I can see children 6 years ago who struggled in many different situations who are flourishing now. And the wonderful feedback actually from the parents saying, for the first time ever, we've gone out for a meal as a family. My child, my daughter, my son can now be in the restaurant and sit with the family and have a meal, and the restaurant understands the needs of my child, and they've made us feel so welcome. And we now, as a family, can do those things, because there's a lot of apprehension from our families of the what ifs. How would their child actually be received in the broader community in those spaces? And there's been massive steps which have really taken place over the last 6 years in my time here, and I'm sure in the next 6 years and the next maybe 10 or 20 years, things will really rapidly move forward as well.
It does sound like the community and family work is kind of like the puzzle kind of coming together and that additional kind of wraparound training that you've been offering, because
Yeah.
it is just that education and that knowing and kind of, it's not even necessarily empathy. I think it is sometimes just understanding the why. That
It,
must make the big difference in the community with the work that you're doing.
I think it really does. It's not that there's a lack of will or a lack of intent. Again, if I
Hmm.
take it back 6 years ago, just a lack of understanding. So
Yeah.
a big part of our responsibility is to educate, is to share about autism, to share about special educational needs, to take away some of the anxieties and fears. I think there's often a perception that our children will will be challenging, that they will make things really, really difficult. And our message within our school is really that our children are different but not less, that our children are just as equal and have the same rights as everybody else. And it's just having people understand and then be invested in taking the actual time to think about their own approach and think about how they can best support our children.
And I just thinking about, you said earlier about there's the big steps where you've seen kind of, 6 years later, the kind of transformational journey that some, and hopefully all students take in your care. But I'm wondering about those small steps, like the small things that you do to kind of get the ball rolling, because it can be really hard. I'm speaking from experience. I work in an autistic school myself, and that
Yeah,
small step to crossing the threshold of the supermarket when it's such an anxiety, and just wondering about
yeah,
some of those.
yeah. I think I would bring it back to the personalisation, that we have to
Mm,
think about this for every single child in a way that is right for them. So it's never a one size fits all approach. So it's thinking about the individual child and what is it that they need to be able to access. Whether it, again, if I use the local supermarket, because we go there a lot with our children around their life skills and
mm,
their work, that it's thinking about our children there. Well, we have some children who need the visual schedules, children who need those visual cues. We have children who may struggle to step into the supermarket. So how do we get them into that space? So staff taking them on that one-on-one basis. It may be sometimes our children struggle because when they go into the supermarket, there's a lot of loud noises and there's music
mm.
playing, and that's really overwhelming. So it's thinking about the individual needs of every child, and then being prepared to mitigate the barriers, to work through those barriers, and take time and just kind of really persevere, because again, as I say, nothing always happens overnight. It can take months, many months, or years even. But it's having that perseverance and listening to the child, whether that be orally as they're verbally telling us, or many of our children are pre-verbal. It's looking at the cues and hints and reactions from our children, and having those deep relationships and knowing what our children are showing us through their actions and telling us through either their behaviours or their responses, and then adapting our practice. I think very much working in the field of special education, that we as the adults are the investigators, we're the analysers, we are interpreting the messaging and the situations that we find ourselves in with our children, and then creating a new plan, adapting our plan, and thinking, okay, what will we do next time to mitigate what didn't work last time, and being responsive in the moment to the needs of our children.
I know I'm holding on to that phrase that you said earlier, actually, about the kind of the pathway to change isn't linear. And I'm thinking that, and lots of that non-linear change is actually about the adaptations that we make as staff, and as we learn and deepen our connection and relationship with the student, and we kind of learn what works, what doesn't work, and change things. I imagine this really spiky kind of profile of the changes that happen, but it's going it all in the right direction, right?
It
um
is. It is. Everything's moving forward. I think we'll take. There are times that we take the 5 steps forward and maybe one step back, but we're always moving forward. And it's celebrate the success. That's a big thing that we think about as a school.
mm,
We really celebrate those positives, those real successes, and then we analyze when things haven't gone wrong. And just to come round to the point again as well, having our conversation with parents is so important.
yeah.
So it's having that dialogue constantly with our parents, and making sure we have as much information as possible, and we are sharing that information. It's that two-way focus of our conversation, really.
Yeah, that transparency, openness with parents, carers. um
Absolutely.
Matt, I can't believe it. I actually, this is always the way on the podcast. I'm like, oh, I've got loads more questions I want to ask Matt, maybe off air. But we're going to round up with 3 top tips.
Okay, so thinking about going into the community, I think my first area that I think of, start with the child. We have to start with the child. So what is right for that child? What is the right approach? So always start with the individual. The second is to hold on to the positives. Always celebrate the things which go really, really well. So even when things can become a bit challenging, hold on to those positives and really think about why we're doing this and who we're doing this for. And the third thing would be perseverance. I think it's please don't give up, because we will get there. Our children always amaze us. They always get there. We just have to find the right way to help them. So the perseverance element is really, really important.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Matt. Really great nuggets in there. And it's really got me thinking about the young people that I work with. Thanks again for your time, Matt, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you, Claire. My pleasure.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.